Verse 1 of Exodus 16. We read, Then they set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the sons of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departure from the land of Egypt. Okay, the exact location of Elim and the wilderness of Sin are not known, really. There are a lot of explanations for locations given, but since we don't really know where Mount Sinai is, it's probably in Arabia. But since we're not sure of that, these places in between are kind of fuzzy. And they've been traveling for 30 days now. They left on the 15th day of the first month. Verses 2 and 3. And the whole congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the sons of Israel said to them, Would that we had died by Yahweh's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, when we ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Well, the unleavened bread they prepared is gone now. And the people were grumbling. They had nothing to eat and were complaining that Moses brought them into the wilderness to die. You know, they were far from starving. When they left Egypt, what did they bring with them? They had flocks and herds, remember? There's plenty to eat there, but they probably didn't want to slaughter them for food because flocks and herds, they were the measure of wealth in that day. So I think the people had their minds on that. Well, we don't want to lose all our wealth just to eat. You know, there are ways to address issues, and there are ways not to address issues. Whining, complaining, and grumbling are not good ways to address an issue. See, especially when you're dealing with Elohim. That is just not the way to go. But the people were not grateful, thankful, or gracious for the deliverance they were given at all. This grumbling eventually led to the people not being allowed into this land that they were promised. In Numbers 14, verses 22 and 23, we read, Surely all the men who have seen my glory and my signs, which I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, yet have put me to the test these 10 times, and have not listened to my voice, shall by no means see the land which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who spurned me see it. Well, that's what the whining and grumbling and complaining led to. They weren't going to get to the place. Verse 4, Then Yahweh said to Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether or not they will walk in my instruction. Elohim is speaking to Moses only right here. Moses is not going to tell the people that they're being tested. Moses is going to give the people instructions to follow. That's what he's going to give them. The obedience is up to them. I mean, it's still that way today. I mean, we've been given the instructions of the Father through Moses. And the obedience, he wants us to be obedient to that. Verse 5, And it will come about on the 6th day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. Why are they going to get twice as much on the 6th day? Oh, the 7th day. But you see, the Christian world and the Jewish world both say the law hadn't been given yet. They haven't got to Mount Sinai yet. They're not there. So what's the big hullabaloo here? Well, the fact of the matter is, they already knew the Torah. They already had it. All right, it wasn't given at Mount Sinai. It wasn't here's the law. Now you have the wow. Look at that law. Huh? Adultery. What? Come on. It's not. That's not how it was at all. They already knew the Torah. I think Noah knew about what clean and unclean animals were. How did Cain and Abel know to give the proper sin sacrifice? There's a list a mile long. They already knew the Sabbath day. They already knew it. They already knew they're supposed to follow it. Elohim does not give them detailed instructions to follow the Sabbath day here. He simply states that on the sixth day, they're together twice as much as they do on the other days. Now, instructions on the Sabbath day, it's simply not necessary. The people already knew the Sabbath day was instituted at creation. In Genesis 2, verses 2 and 3. And by the seventh day, Elohim completed his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. Then Elohim blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which Elohim had created and made. The people already knew that they were not to work on that day. Therefore, Moses knew what Yahweh was referring to when he said to instruct the people to gather up twice as much on the sixth day. This follows along with other truths we see in Scripture. The Sabbath, which was instituted at creation, was made for man. It was not just made for the Jewish people, like so many people in this world think. Mark 2, verses 27 and 28. And he was saying to them, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Consequently, the Son of Man is master even of the Sabbath. Exodus 16, verse 6. So Moses and Aaron said to all the sons of Israel, at evening you will know that Yahweh has brought you out of the land of Egypt. You know, it's amazing the people needed more proof that Elohim brought them out of Egypt. It wasn't Moses and Aaron. Moses and Aaron were just acting on behalf of Elohim. Verses 7 and 8. And in the morning you will see the glory of Yahweh, for he hears your grumblings against Yahweh. And what are we that you grumble against us? And Moses said, this will happen when Yahweh gives you meat to eat in the evening and bread to the full in the morning. For Yahweh hears your grumblings which you grumble against him. And what are we? Your grumblings are not against us, but against Yahweh. That's who they're grumbling against. You know, they couched it as grumbling against Moses and Aaron, okay? Because they didn't want to have the audacity to come out and say that they're grumbling against Elohim. But that's the problem. Their hearts were against Elohim. And that's the fact of the matter. When man rejects his word and his message, okay? When people reject, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. They're not rejecting the commandments, okay? What are they rejecting? They're rejecting him. That's what they're doing. They're rejecting him. They're rejecting Elohim himself. 1 Samuel 8, verse 7, and Yahweh said to Samuel, listen to the voice of the people in regard to all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they've rejected me from being king over them. See, the people demanded a king, like all the nations around wanted one. And Samuel says, no, your king is Elohim. And Elohim talked to him and said, no, you know, they're not rejecting you and your message, which is from him. They're rejecting me, is what he says. Conversely, if one receives his word and is obedient to it, that person receives the Father and loves the Father. In John 14, starting in verse 21, he who has my commandments and keeps them, it is he who loves me. And he who loves me shall be loved by my Father, and I will love him and will disclose myself to him. Judas, not Iscariot, said to him, Master, what then has happened that you're going to disclose yourself to us and not to the world? Yeshua answered and said to him, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our abode with him. That's why it says if you don't obey his commandments, you don't even know him, okay? And there's also places in Scripture it says if you don't want to keep his word, you hate him, and you're rejecting him. That's just how it is. Exodus 16, verses 9 and 10. Then Moses said to Aaron, say to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, come near before Yahweh, for he has heard your grumblings. And it came about, as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the sons of Israel, that they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of Yahweh appeared in the cloud. So the glory of Elohim appears in a cloud. This is probably some kind of luminous presence within the cloud. We don't know. But this presence of Elohim, that's going to affirm the words of Moses and Aaron. Okay? This is the same way Elohim appeared when Yeshua was transfigured, if you'll recall. That's in Matthew 17, verse 5. And while he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them. And behold, a voice out of the cloud saying, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." We're going to revisit that. Yeah?
Would that be the Shekinah glory?
Well, you see, the Shekinah glory, that's kind of a... That's a... I don't know that that's really scriptural. See, and I used to say the same thing. But I looked into it, and I don't know that that's really scriptural, that term. It's, I don't think it's in Scripture. So that's why I don't use it. But, yeah, I see what you're saying. I'll have to refresh myself on that, but I quit using it for a reason. And I think that was the reason. It's not exactly scriptural. Verses 11 and 12. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, I have heard the grumblings of the sons of Israel. Speak to them, saying, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread, and you shall know that I am Yahweh, your Elohim. So Elohim mentions again the grumblings of the people. He's going to give them the meat they want and the bread they're demanding. And the bread is going to be provided 6 days a week for the next 40 years. And the meat will be there on occasion. Verse 13, so it came about at evening that the quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. See, the quails were probably a kind found in Judea as well as in the deserts of Arabia and Egypt. And they're a very good food. Verses 14 and 15, when the layer of dew evaporated, behold, on the surface of the wilderness there was a fine flake-like thing, fine as the frost on the ground. When the sons of Israel saw it, they said to one another, what is it? For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, it is the bread which Yahweh has given you to eat. We don't know exactly what this manna was, but it must have been similar to the grain we use for bread, because you prepare it the same way. Okay, in Numbers 11, starting at verse 7, it talks about the preparation. It says, now the manna was like coriander seed, and its appearance like that of bdellium. The people would go about and gather it and grind it between two millstones and beat it in the mortar and boil it in the pot and make cakes with it. And its taste was as a taste of cakes baked with oil. And when the dew fell on the camp at night, the manna would fall with it. Verse 16. This is what Yahweh has commanded. Gather of it every man as much as he should eat. You shall take an omer apiece according to the number of persons each of you has in his tent. Okay, now an omer. How much is an omer? About a little over 2 quarts is what they're saying here. This is plenty of food and nourishment for a person for an entire day. They were not to gather more than an omer for each person. Verses 17 and 18, and the sons of Israel did so. And some gathered much, and some little. When they measured it with an omer, he who had gathered much had no excess, and he who gathered little had no lack. Every man gathered as much as he should eat. Now, some people apparently gathered more than an omer, and some gathered less. But when they got together, it would appear, what they're saying here, they shared it. Okay, so if you gathered more, you scrape it off the top, give it to the person who didn't quite have enough, and they all had the prescribed amount. Verses 19 and 20. And Moses said to them, let no man leave any of it until morning. But they did not listen to Moses and left part of it until morning. And it bred worms and became foul. And Moses was angry with them. the spoiling of the food was not a totally natural phenomenon here. Elohim used this spoiling process to punish the disobedient. You know, yeah.
They didn't miss a chance, did they? To disobey.
No, they didn't miss a chance to disobey. That's right. Yeah. You know, they were to live by faithfulness and obedience to Elohim. That's how they were supposed to live, not according to how they felt or according to what they desired.
Pat, this kind of reads, as far as the Torah, God's teaching and instruction. If he was one of this old God, you know, the lonely bearded guy, you know, wanting to come and kill him, he would have zapped him a long time ago. It proves that his word is the teaching and instruction, teaching his people, because here, that's what he's doing. He's
Yep.
teaching and instructing them constantly.
Can you imagine how many times that they actually essentially looked Elohim in the face and said, "You're just trying to kill us," after he saved them?
Should have zapped him right there.
But he didn't. Yeah. But he didn't. Yeah, it's rather amazing. He's very gracious and long-suffering. And that's what we could be grateful for. Well, the people were being tested to determine their desire to either be obedient or their desire to follow their greed. Oh boy, free food. Get away. It's my free food. No. That's not the way to be. Verses 21 and 22, and they gathered it morning by morning, every man as much as he should eat. But when the sun grew hot, it would melt. Now it came about on the 6th day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one, when all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses. Now, the people did what they were told, gathered twice as much on the 6th day. They wanted further instructions from Moses on what to do on the 7th day. Verse 23. Then he said to them, "This is what Yahweh meant. Tomorrow is a Sabbath observance, a holy Sabbath to Yahweh. Bake what you'll bake and boil what you'll boil, and all that's left over put aside to be kept until morning." Okay. Now this passage here is really what the Jewish people use to say you can't cook on the Sabbath. Or any kind of high Sabbath day, any feast day that no work is permitted on. But the passage doesn't state that. As a matter of fact, it says just the opposite, really. It says, bake what you're going to bake and boil what you'll boil, and all that's left, what you haven't baked and boiled, set aside for the next day. Keep it till the next morning. And it doesn't say they have to eat raw manna on the Sabbath. You know? It's not what it says. As a matter of fact, on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, they were told, don't do any work, but you can prepare your food for that day. Okay? And that was just back in Exodus 12, verses 15 and 16. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, but on the first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whoever eats anything leavened from the first day until the 7th day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. And on the first day you shall have a holy assembly, and another holy assembly on the 7th day. No work at all shall be done on them, except what must be eaten by every person. That alone may be prepared by you. So he's saying on the Sabbath day, or on a high holy day here, a feast day of no work, you can prepare food you're going to eat that day. You can't prepare food to eat for the week. All right? That's work. But food you're going to eat that day, you can do that. That's just part of enjoying the day together, is eating well. Yeah.
Could that also mean that you gather, you have produce, you gather it and prepare it?
You already have it gathered. So that's one thing. Don't gather it on that day.
I'm saying only what you're going to prepare.
Yeah.
Okay, is that?
Only what you're going to prepare for that day.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You only go out and take one
Come
vessel.
back now.
No, you did that the day before. He's talking about harvesting.
Oh,
Come back now. You're not talking about then.
Now then on the Sabbath.
See, then they wouldn't be going out harvesting.
you're right. He wants us to gather that kind of thing the day before. Do your gathering and stuff the day before. And that's going to come up here.
But you're talking about when you're traveling, and then you're talking about when you're traveling, and on the Sabbath you go in a grain field and have what you want for that. At that time.
Oh, yeah, right. Like the heads of grain, and yeah,
That's what I'm reading.
sure.
Only, they weren't taking a basket, picking everything, right.
Right. No, just getting enough to eat.
And when they were full, then they quit.
Right. Going back to Exodus 16, verse 24, so they put it aside until morning, as Moses had ordered, and it did not become foul, nor was there any worm in it. Now here, this is what I would say to those that say you can't cook on the Sabbath. Oh, so you're saying this wasn't supernatural, it's because they boiled it or baked it, it's because it didn't go bad. No, that's not correct. It was a supernatural thing that Elohim used. And Moses said, eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to Yahweh. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the seventh day of the Sabbath there will be none. The people were to trust and believe that Yahweh would provide for them daily. That was the idea. They were to trust that the Sabbath is declared holy, it's declared set apart, and they were to take this fact very, very seriously. And once again, there's no prohibition against preparing food on the Sabbath. It's the prohibition. You don't gather it on the Sabbath. Verse 27. And it came about on the seventh day that some of the people went out to gather, but they found none. Then Yahweh said to Moses, how long do you refuse to keep my commandments and my instructions? See, Yahweh has given you the Sabbath, therefore he gives you bread for 2 days. On the sixth day remain every man in his place. Let no man go out of his place on the seventh day. Many Jewish sages have said this passage is a prohibition against mobility on the Sabbath. They use the reasoning that no man should travel more than 2,000 cubits outside the city walls on the Sabbath in accord with this passage. And this distance is derived from the boundaries of the Levitical cities in Numbers 35, verse 5. They also say this distance is justified because it's the distance the people stayed behind the Ark of the Covenant at the crossing of the Jordan River. Oh, you see, denomination just board, it does. You're right. I mean, those things have nothing to do with what they're talking about here. The context of the passage is that no man is to leave his place to gather manna on the Sabbath. Okay? It doesn't mean you stay in your tent. You stay in your pup tent all day. All right? That's not what it's saying. You don't go out to gather food on the Sabbath when you're wandering in the wilderness and the food's being provided for you 6 days a week. Okay? And double on the sixth day. We got to look at the example of Yeshua, who came to teach Torah to its fullest. He went in the synagogue on the Sabbath. There's a lot of people who won't go to a synagogue or an assembly because, one, if you start your car, you're igniting a flame on the Sabbath. And the other is, if I have to walk too far, I'm not going to do that because of this. So then they forsake the assembling on the Sabbath in order to follow these other directives that they feel are in there, which I don't feel like they are in there. But Yeshua went to the synagogue on the Sabbath. In Luke 4, verse 16, he came to Nazareth where he had been brought up, and as was his custom, he entered the synagogue on the Sabbath and stood up to read. Paul did the same thing in Acts 18, verse 4, and he, being Paul, was reasoning in the synagogue every Sabbath and trying to persuade Jews and Greeks. Exodus 16, verses 30 and 31. So the people rested on the seventh day, and the house of Israel named it manna, and it was like coriander seed, white, and its taste was like wafers with honey. The coriander plant grows wild in Palestine and Egypt, and I wouldn't know coriander at all if I didn't Google it and look it up and show you a picture there. But it produces small, spicy, gray-white seeds. But the descriptions given to manna don't fit any natural substance that we have today. It would not remain edible overnight except on the Sabbath. and it appeared every day except the Sabbath for 40 years. Verse 32. Then Moses said, this is what Yahweh has commanded. Let an omer full of it be kept throughout your generations, that they may see the bread that I fed you in the wilderness, that when I brought you out of the land of Egypt. And Moses said to Aaron, take a jar and put an omer full of manna in it, and place it before Yahweh to be kept throughout your generations. As Yahweh commanded Moses, so Aaron placed it before the testimony to be kept. The omer is not mentioned again as a measurement in Scripture. It alone is used as a measure for manna. That's all it's used for. Now this omer full was later placed before the testimony to keep as a reminder to future generations. We read about it in Hebrews 9, verse 4, having a golden altar of incense, and the Ark of the Covenant covered on all sides with gold, in which was a golden jar holding the manna, and Aaron's rod which budded, and the tables of the covenant. And then lastly, in Exodus 16, verses 35 and 36, and the sons of Israel ate the manna 40 years, until they came to an inhabited land. They ate the manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. Now an omer is a tenth of an ephah. Okay, the manna continued for 40 years, and it ceased when the people entered the land and started eating what was the produce of the promised land. That's in Joshua 5. Verse 12 says, and the manna ceased on the day after they had eaten some of the produce of the land, so that the sons of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate some of the yield of the land of Canaan during that year. That is the manna from heaven. And it coincides with our chapter in Luke too, by the way, in several ways. So, any questions on Exodus 16? The manna thing, Elohim provided for them in every way. In every way. The only work they really had to do, go pick it up. Mm-hmm. That was your daily chore. Go pick it up. Yeah. Right? Right? Well, now, why would someone go out on the Sabbath day and try and get more that first time? What would be the reason behind that? It starts with a G. Greed. That's the only reason. Who are you going to serve? It's free food.
Tomorrow there's more, so this has no value.
And it's going to go bad after a day anyway, right?
You know,
No, I figured it out. We just don't want to do that.
That don't want to do what the Father says, right? Uh-huh.
Never mind,
Yeah.
they continuously do that.
What's that?
They continuously do that on the Sabbath day.
I don't think so.
It was just
Uh-uh.
an example of them doing it, you know, just like with the getting two supplies for the Sabbath on Saturday. And then, you know, say it didn't go bad, but then, you know, or it was going bad if they kept it during the week.
Which they did.
Down on the Sabbath, you know, it was good. So why would I do that? You know, so
Right.
testing that stuff.
That's right. That's exactly, and he said right away, Moses, I'm going to use this to test people. Okay? And just tell them this. Just go out, pick the stuff up. Don't have more than an omer. Don't keep it the next day. On the sixth day, gather twice as much. And don't go and gather any on the Sabbath. Okay? See, some of these things here, we're specific instructions for this particular situation. All right? About gathering manna and stuff like that. And you can't always take these things as overall commands to be used in everyday life. Okay? Because we don't walk out our front door and gather our food up before the dew wastes away, right? And we have to look at certain situations here. We are to assemble. We can get out of our tents on the Sabbath day, okay? Any questions?